This is Dr. Caroline Peterson and the Natural Women's Health Institute. Today we're talking about our energy body. I want to start by saying that our energy body is totally normal. It's not something weird. It's not something esoteric. It's not something that only certain people with special abilities can see or work with or perceive. It's a normal part of who we are. And the sooner we get over the idea that it's like weird, abnormal, unreal, the more readily and more easily it'll be for people to start working with it. And it'll make everybody's life much better. In the 80s, I was an anthropology student, and I loved studying religion and shamanism and the different ways of healing throughout the world. So that was really my first introduction to shamanism. Michael Harner is one of the preeminent anthropologists who've studied shamanism, and he actually has an institute that teaches people how to become a shaman or work as a shaman or use shamanic techniques to heal. He, in the 80s, had a book that I read, and I did everything he said. I practiced all of the exercises, and so that was my first sort of putting my toe in the water. There's a lot of anthropologists like that who have written books about shamanism based on their fieldwork. So another one that everybody probably has heard of is Carlos Castaneda. He studied a lot with Don Juan and has written many books and many exercises about what to do to develop your shamanic abilities. So I read all those books many times and practiced all those exercises, and over time I began perceiving differently. I began developing my ability to perceive energy fields. This is totally normal. And it's something that just takes practice. So like when I went to chiropractic college, at first when they were like, okay, start palpating, we were all like, what? I don't know anything. I can't perceive anything with my fingers. And our teachers were like, just keep doing it. Just keep practicing. So I was one of those people who like went nuts and practiced 4 hours a day on my palpation skills. I went in at 7 o'clock every morning and palpated for 1 hour before school started. And then I palpated during the lunch hour. And then we would have class for 1 or 2 hours. And then I would palpate for like an hour after school. So I was just like, I'm going to learn this. I really want to be good at this. And I think it was probably harder for me than it was for other people because very few people spent that much time practicing. But I feel like it's what I needed, and I feel like it benefited me. One of the things that we learned in chiropractic college was craniopathy. So many people don't know this, but there are a lot of different styles of craniosacral therapy. The most common one is what is called the upledger technique and craniosacral therapy. But there are a lot of other techniques, including craniopathy and sacro-occipital technique and things like that are more common in chiropractic. And so in chiropractic, we just learn all of them because we want to be able to feel all the subtle energies, all the different ways of perceiving into the body. So I remember when we were taking craniopathy class, we had a visitor who came in. Many of our teachers were MDs, and so they could take the classes too. And so one of the MDs came in, and he was taking the class with us, and he was just like, I can't feel anything. This doesn't exist. Cerebrospinal fluid pulse. The cranial bones can't move. And it was like after the first or second day when nobody could really feel anything. But in his mind, it was just like a foregone conclusion that, of course, you can't feel anything. There's nothing to feel here. And so, of course, he didn't continue to practice. And so he could never feel anything. So for him, his conclusion was that because he didn't practice and he couldn't feel anything, no one could feel anything, which in my opinion is not accurate. So it's just like, so craniosacral therapy is something that's pretty common and quite well accepted nowadays. And so the energy body, the energy field, all the energy movements and patterns in the body, in my opinion, are very much like that. That they're very much like learning how to palpate the cerebral spinal fluid pulse and the patterns of the cranial bones and dural tension patterns and things like that are very subtle, but you can become trained in that, and you can do it, and you can have a lot of confidence that what you're feeling is correct. And I feel the same way about the energy field, that you can learn how the energy field is set up. You can see it, you can feel it, and you can see and feel and perceive when there are aberrations in that normal, in what is, the normal configuration. And then there are tools that we have to work with that, to regulate it, to fix it, so that that infrastructure, the energetic infrastructure of our body, can become normalized and more healthy, so that everything else that's built on that can also become more healthy. So as I continued my learning experience in energy work, I read all the books that I could. I went to the esoteric section of all the bookstores and pulled out all the books on, the chakras and, all the different ways of learning energy work, Barbara Brennan's work, did all the exercises, practiced and practiced and practiced. And over time, felt like, oh, okay, I'm learning more and more. And then I started working with people who also were either shaman or were studying shamanism. So one of the shaman that I worked with for a number of years was Shannon Kelly. And he had a tremendous impact on me and my learning of the energy field and shamanism. I worked with Bob White, and I've worked with Wendy Jensen, who's also a therapist, and Ariana Orton, who is a massage therapist, and Lori Krampitz, who's also a massage therapist. And each of these people has taught me many things, and as I work with a shaman, then I am able to feel things in my body more. So Susan Fulmer and I were kind of going through our training and learning at the same time. And so I remember like 10 or 20 years ago, we were in this state where we were like, wait, am I perceiving something about me or about that other person? Or how is this happening? What am I perceiving? And so over time, I remember that it really was a process of like kind of setting up some rules and kind of like just learning, just becoming more familiar with like your teacher, your spirit guides, so that you can really have a great sense of clarity about what information is coming through for which person. And also really setting up boundaries for oneself and saying, I stop here, my energy field is not going over there, and I'm not going to perceive what's going on in your body by feeling it in my body. So really creating very specific distinction between the self and the other. This is very, very important. And so over time, things became easier and easier just because of practice, and a person develops a lot of sort of like clarity and more immediacy about how to interpret things and what they mean. And part of it is like being okay with not knowing, being okay with being confused, and being able to ask your guide like, okay, I'm confused, what's going on here? And then the guide being like, okay, let me explain this to you. So the guide that I work with predominantly is Michael the Archangel. And I remember in the 90s, I was working with Ariana Orton, treating her, and she was like, "Who's that? Who's that standing beside you?" And I was like, "Oh, that's Michael." And she was like, "Oh, I was wondering who that was, because he's always there with you." And so it's really nice, when other people can see your guides too, and like especially in the beginning, when you're just like, wait, is this thing that I'm perceiving real or not real? And so it's really nice when someone else can perceive and say, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about." And that's part of the learning process, is finding a group of people that you can learn together with. So the way that I work with the energy body in my practice is, I guess I enter into it several different ways. So one, if the physical body or the emotional body does not respond in the way that it should, then I'm pretty sure there's an energetic component. So because I've been in practice a long time, I have a pretty clear expectation of how things should respond, how quickly they should respond, and in what way they should respond. And so then when it's not like that, then I can be like, okay, well, let's check the energy body. And so that's one of the things. Another thing is, a lot of times the energy body will just be like, "Hello, take care of me first." And so then that is, and a lot of times it's the first visit or one of the early visits where there's just so much like derangement in the energy body that really has to be set up first in order to like do any other work. The other thing is that the energy body and the physical body, of course, are very closely tied together. I would say that the energy body and the emotional body are way closer tied together. And so a lot of times when we're doing NET, neuro-emotional technique, mind-body therapy, then when it's like, oh my God, like this is taking 1,000,000 years to flush out, then you can like see what is going on in the energy body that's not releasing that stuck emotional pattern. And so then it's just like way faster, way better to switch over to energy work, so that you can just like shift that entanglement really in the energy field, so that the emotion is free to just like slide out easily. And so energy work is a lot of times I'll use my hands, because different types of energy will have different sensory patterns. And so I don't know, maybe because I do manual therapy, then I just continue using my hands to work with the energy field, although it's not necessary. So like if you do remote energy work, you can do it, of course, with like out your hands, just through energy. And so it's not necessary, but I commonly will use my hands to work with the energy field in person. And so over time, in the beginning and over the first couple decades, I would say I used more of the shamanic techniques, using crystals or drumming or sound or chanting or things like that. And over time, I realized that those sorts of helpers are really for me. Like, they are, in a way, distracting the mental mind. They're giving a sense of ceremony that is not necessary. Sometimes it's necessary for the patient. Sometimes the patient will feel better if there's a sense of like ceremony and something they can kind of like glom onto. And it's totally fine to do all those things. There's no problem at all with them. But they're not okay, so what I'm trying to say is that they can give the perception of magic. And what I experience now, I don't experience as magical. I experience it as something that is kind of pretty predictable, pretty pretty understandable. Just like the physical body is, just like the mental body is, just like the chemical body is. Like there's patterns. There's patterns that you can read, and that makes sense. And that if we need a drum or crystals or other things, that's totally fine. There's no problem with that. But don't become confused with those crystals or the drumming or the chanting or whatever as being the thing that does the work. Those, I would say, are the things that allow us to step out of the mental mind so that we can be more intuitive and confident in working with the emotional field. So no judgment, but I just don't do that too much anymore, because I guess I kind of feel like things make sense even without that, although I don't have a problem with other people using it or using it myself if it's helpful for the patient, for instance. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the energy body is a normal part of your being, and also is not something that can be perceived only by special people who have special skills that the rest of us can't develop. All of us have intrinsic abilities to feel and understand and work with the energy field. We just need practice. Just like with any other skill, it's just a matter of practicing.